All right. Welcome to the James Spearman Show. Another great episode. We've got another amazing guest with me now, Lynsey Howell. She's got a lot of experience in especially the airlines and commercial aviation. And not only that, as an author and TEDx speaker. Very unique individual that I have the opportunity to have on my show. Very passionate about aviation. Lynsey, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, James. I'm always happy to talk aviation and airplanes and everything in that realm.
Yeah, that's right. So at some point in almost everyone's aviation world, aviation life, there was like that one moment that sparked. This is normally how I lead off the show. For me, when I was, in middle school, my dad took me to an air show. I had heard about my grandfather in World War II. I'd seen pictures of him in a B-25, but it didn't click until I went to an air show and at our Orlando Executive, actually. And some elderly couple let me sit there 172, and I was hooked from there. I didn't know exactly how it was going to work out, but I knew I wanted to do airplanes. Lynsey, for you, like when did you get the spark, the bug in for aviation?
Yeah, my moment is very clear and sparkly. I grew up in Frisco, Colorado, a small mountain town, and I wanted to be an astronaut and a ballerina. And that was, that's basically describes my personality, two different things. For Drug Week at our school, there was a Army helicopter that landed on our sports field, and all of us kids were in awe. But when I watched that helicopter take off and float away into the clouds, I just remember thinking that's what I want to do. And I think it combined both of those desires as like a ballerina dancing the clouds and the astronaut of just going places and adventure and travel. So that stuck with me, and I chased that till I was 18.
That's awesome. So, how'd you get your first hours? Right. Obviously, you're a very accomplished airline pilot now. How were you able to start getting hours?
Well, I did a lot of research. I researched the Coast Guard and Navy, and I wasn't completely sold on the military at the time. And I actually spoke with a lot of helicopter pilots, and they said to go get my fixed wing ratings first and then decide. So I knew I also wanted to go to college and get that experience. And so I started looking at the schools that offered a 4-year degree in aviation. And I narrowed it down to Arizona State University and Kansas State University. And I picked Kansas State University. I went and explored the campus, and I just really fell in love with the people there. And so I went at 18, I started Kansas State University, Salina, and like most college 141 experiences, you go and you start taking your flight lessons, right after your math class. So I did that journey and graduated in about 3.5 years. I flew during the summertime as well and took classes and was a certified flight instructor, MEI. I was hired back by the school to be an instructor there. I did their jet transition course, so I flew the school CJ and King Air 90 as well for the Alumni Association. So really great experience and prepared me really well for what comes after college.
That's awesome. What was your experience like as a young flight instructor? It's so funny that most people don't know this, that generally, flight instructors are people trying to get hours to get to their next goal, which is the airlines. And so normally that ends up being the very young pilots. They've gone straight through their training and then get their CFI, and now they can go straight to work. And the Air Force, it's not unique, right? So I went through Air Force pilot training. They call normally they're number one out of the class for Air Force pilot training gets, F-22, F-35. The next person is what they call FAPE, first assignment instructor pilot. They're going straight to be an instructor training the next, with less than like 300 hours or something. They're instructing in a 1,000 shaft horsepower T6, which is crazy. But really cool. What are some stories that you remember as young CFI?
Yeah, I think as most flight instructors, you think, wait, am I really prepared to teach this other person how to fly? And I remember thinking that I'm just a couple steps ahead of where they are. And so I know a little bit more, and I really enjoyed flight instructing, but I remember I would have like these couple of tics I would do when I was nervous, and I would like tie my headset cord like in a knot. And then I'd like, rub my big toe, and I knew it was like a nervous tic that no one could see. And I know it's weird, but like I rubbed like a hole in my shoe from just doing that. But I think the best moment I ever had as a flight instructor was teaching my dad how to fly. So after graduating high school or college, I didn't have a goal. I didn't have a dream. I didn't want to go to the airlines, and I didn't know what to do. And I moved back home, and my mom suggested, why don't you teach your dad how to fly? I was also saving money to go to Europe because I thought that sounded fun. And so I taught my dad how to fly, and he was an engineer. So he was one of my most difficult students ever because he just overanalyzed everything, and really gave me a different set of challenge. But this is the man who taught me how to drive and how to ski. And I knew that after I taught him how to fly, that I could walk away from aviation and be completely satisfied and grateful for that experience.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, which first off, that is freaking awesome that you had the opportunity to instruct your dad. I lost my dad back in 22, and this plane behind me, actually, this T-34, one of the last flights that he took before he passed, I was able to put him in the back, and we flew to the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. And I will never, ever, forget those moments that I had with him in the cockpit. It's just awesome.
Same.
So that's incredible. And then number two, so a lot of my I own an aircraft maintenance shop too, right? And all of my customers that come from an engineering background, they just want to know, well, why? Why did that break? Why did this happen? Why did that? And I'm like, it's an airplane, okay? It's something, they very rarely want to cooperate and work all the time, okay? You don't need to know exactly why.
Yeah.
Okay, so you came back and you instructed your dad, and then what were the next steps as you kept getting hours?
That's a good question because I also took a lot of detours along the way. But getting hours, I worked for an avionics maintenance shop in Monterey, California. I was their ferry pilot, so a customer would come in and drop the plane off, and I would fly them back to Palo Alto. They were also a Cirrus dealer, so I had some time in a Cirrus, and then eventually I got hired as a corporate pilot flying a King Air 200, and shortly after that, I was called to fly a Citation 10. I had 1,100 hours, and I'm getting this call to go fly the most beautiful business jet, and that was a really interesting story. All of my jobs I've ever had are because of networking. It's always someone vouching for my character or recommending me. And that's what happened with this is the line guys at the Monterey FBO recommended me. They didn't even know my last name when the Citation 10 pilot needed another co-pilot. And that was my first real paid corporate salaried position. And then shortly after that, the jet was sold in 2010, and I was out of a job and had no idea what to do. And I sold all of my things and traveled around Central America for a while because there's no jobs. And after that, I moved back to Monterey and bought a sailboat and lived on that for a little bit. And then I got a call from Seabourn Airlines to fly seaplanes in the Caribbean. And I left my new sailboat in Monterey and went to the Caribbean and started flying the Twin Otter on wheels, and then eventually was worked up into the seaplane. But I want to say real quick, a lot of people kind of think, oh, isn't that so great of you? But I had my single engine seaplane rating. My dad and I went and got that together. And when I applied at Seabourn, they said, well, go get your multi-engine rating. And Because a lot of people have that dream. Oh, I'm going to go fly seaplanes down in the Caribbean, and they show up and they think it's just going to happen. But I did that extra step, and I put in that hard work, and I had some money saved, and I went and I paid for my multi-engine seaplane rating. So when I got that phone call, I was prepared. I was ready to go down, and I was fully rated and qualified. And I worked really hard on the wheel side of the operation and proved myself as an employee, so that when they needed another pilot on the seaplane side, I was there and I was ready. So I think a lot of people think, oh, these big dreams, and I think you got to have a lot of determination and be prepared.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. But you're exactly right. I do. Um, I I'm also a CFI, and all I do is airplanes all the time, and I run into a lot of pilots, particularly younger than we are, and it's it's really weird, how that it the idea of you might have a little bit of discomfort along the way to get where you're going, and they're just the
You mean
idea.
hard work?
Yes, like can you handle being uncomfortable for 6 months, right? Like that's like let's start there. And it's really interesting how I, I I have a lot of people stop by the hangar. Hey James, what how can I go off and get a flying job, or how can I do this and do this or that? And I'll give them recommendation. I was like, what you should do is save your money and finish this rating or that rating, or do this. And they're just like, I'm just, speaking foreign language to them. I'm like, dude, like you listen to what you're saying. You want some other person in corporate aviation to pay for your type rating, or to pay for your rating, or pay for your checkout, and then pay you to fly their airplane, and pay you, 6 figures and not fly very much. This
Yes.
doesn't
Yep.
exist. Okay. So you're exactly right. Along the way, you got to be willing to put in the legwork to get where you're going. You got to pay your dues somehow, and having the end in mind. So I think that's really awesome. I have an Icon A5. We have a flight school that does flight training out of the Icon A5 as a platform, and seaplane flying is some of the most fun that I've can have. I also fly the KC-135 for the Air Force still. There's just a Boeing 707. It's an airliner, and we do touch and goes in the pattern. That's a ton of fun. But the funnest thing is seaplane flying and doing splash and goes. I can't tell you and stress to anyone listening that's a pilot, go get your seaplane rating. It definitely helps you. It's not wasted money. It makes you a better pilot. What would you recommend? How would you recommend to other pilots out there that have had the seaplane rating on their mind, or maybe not?
Yeah, and that was recommended to me by another pilot when I was working at the avionics shop. He came in one day after getting his single engine C, and he said, "Lynsey, if there's only one thing you do in aviation, go get your single engine seaplane." And before that, it didn't really cross my mind. And so after he said that, I thought, yeah, why not? So I agree with you. I think it makes you a really precise, stellar pilot, and it's fun. And I think now it's come a long way in popularity, where there's a lot of pilots out there who are going to Florida and Alaska, and they're getting their rating. And so I, just like that, I recommend save your money. If you really want it, go do it. And then just do that next step of whether that's a job or a hobby or maintaining currency. There's some really fun seaplane jobs out there.
So give me one of the most memorable moments that you had flying out in the Caribbean in a seaplane.
My first takeoff was in the St. Thomas Harbor, and the route was basically St. Croix, St. Thomas, 16, 18 times a day back and forth. And because it's a seaplane, you could land and you could take off pretty much anywhere into the wind. And the St. Thomas Harbor kind of is a C shape with Water Island right in the middle, and it's packed with cruise ships. And I remember the first takeoff, we don't do our takeoff distance. We don't really like know how much water of runway we need. And so it was my very first time taking off in the Twin Otter. And as I'm taking off, the cruise ship is backing up. And I'm thinking, we're not going very fast. And we haven't really popped off the water yet. And are we going to hit them? And it's just one of those really weird instances. And the people on the top deck are waving at us. And sure enough, yeah, you know,
Oh, that's cool.
and it's like the Disney cruise ship. So like the Small World horn is playing, and it's like probably this great moment for these people. And we're just taking off, and finally we pop off the water and stay in ground effect for a minute and lift off and turn and wave back to the people. And I just remember thinking like, wow, this is so cool.
You're like,
Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, okay, so that's how much water we need.
yeah, confined area takeoffs. That's what that's called. Which that might be foreign to people. You're like, wow, they don't know their takeoff numbers. But I mean, you're taking off, and you can see for miles and miles, right? Like it's just not really something.
Yeah, it's that buoy down there. You're gonna see that red buoy? That's about where you'll lift off.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that for me as a CFI and icon, that's always my biggest concern. Well, number one, I would say boats coming at you, they think it's awesome. They're like, "Oh man, that thing looks awesome! It's a jet ski with wings," and they'll come up on you at full plane, and you're like, "Whoa, stop, stop, stop!" And then, yeah, can a student put you in an area in a confined space that you can't get back out of one way or the other, in or out? So those are like my two big, protection where in my mind they could put me in a spot that I might not come back from. But so
Yeah.
sailing, talk to me for a minute. I'm probably still like a few years out. All I do is airplanes, and that's real expensive. So sailing is probably real expensive too. So it's still off in the horizon. One of these days I'm going to jump in there. But one of the things I see people on YouTube, they'll go from Southern California to Hawaii, and it takes like 30 days. They're completely off the grid for 30 days. No cell phone, no internet, no nothing. They just, how was, learning from your sailing experience, did that help you as you went into, learning to be a seaplane pilot?
James, I don't know how to sail.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to learn how to sail. I thought it'd be fun to sail around the world, and I thought the first thing would be to buy a boat. I didn't have a job, I didn't have a place to live coming back from Central America, but I had just enough money to buy a boat, and I thought any other flying contract gig I could get would go towards food, and I wouldn't have to worry about rent. So I bought this wooden sailboat with no engine, and I thought I would live on that and learn to sail. And I honestly bought the boat, and the very next day Seaborn Airlines called me for a job, and I said no thanks, I'm just going to do this sailing thing for a while. And then I woke up the next day and I thought, what have I done? I've turned down my dream aviation job. And so eventually I called him back the next day, and I said, I'll be there in 2 weeks. And they said, what about your boat? I said, don't worry about my boat, I'll figure it out. And so I sold my boat for $1 to my best friend, and it stayed in the Monterey Harbor. And after, I met my husband flying seaplanes in the Caribbean. He was also a seaplane pilot down there. And eventually we came back to Monterey, and we bought Sailing for Dummies. And we got a motor on the boat, and we would go out there in the Monterey Harbor and he'd read the book and pull the blue line. I'd be out there pulling the line, and we'd raise the sail, and we figured it out. But it didn't go much past that.
Yeah, that's always like in a sailing boat or a sailing movie. Have you seen Top Gun?
Yeah.
Top Gun, where they're talking about pull this, pull that. It's just like completely foreign. No, that's still cool. Yeah, it's on my bucket list too. I have no clue. There's at the lake that we're at in Tennessee, there's quite a bit of sailboat activity actually, which is kind of cool. It's on the list. Maybe I'll make it past the book. Probably not.
Yeah, I think you're right though. They definitely go hand in hand, and obviously there's a lot from aviation that comes from nautical, you know, sailing and way before planes were invented. So I do love the similarities of those.
That's exactly right. All right. So you're working in the Caribbean. At what point did the airline start calling, or was there a big great gap between those two?
Yeah, it was a pretty big. We're talking a lot more years here of wild adventure and bebopping around.
That's pretty
So
cool, though. Like most people don't have that. I think that's really unique that you were able to, things that interested you, made you happy, and you're able to go, figure that out and make it happen. It is really cool.
yeah, and I think my biggest this is probably all fear based. I probably was afraid at the time of going to the airlines and not having fun or adventure or flying the same route in the same plane day after day, and I just didn't know any different. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of aviation goals. I just wanted to be up there and like in the clouds and in the sky, and that's where it made me happy. So after the Caribbean, we moved back to Monterey, and I got a job flying for Jet Suite. It was a 135. They are now basically their sister company is JSX, and that's what you'll see today is Red Stripe. So I flew, it was a Phenom 100. I flew the Phenom as a first officer and a captain, and really loved the company. It was small, it was a startup. It was a great group of pilots. And after that, I had my first daughter and I stopped flying for a while. Our trips were 5-day trips. And in my mind, I just couldn't conceptualize being gone for 5 days. So my husband at the time, my husband had a job with United, and so he just started down the airline pathway, and I just became the stay-at-home parent at that point.
Got it. Okay. So, took a break from aviation, and then at some point picked it back up. Well, actually, first, hang on. The Phenom. Phenom is one of my favorite airplanes. There's
It's
one on the
fun.
field. There's actually a couple of them on the field here. It's my goal to become a service center for them at some point. But talk to me about the Phenom 100 and how much fun that airplane is.
Oh, it was the best. I mean, it's this sporty little jet with the amazing avionics package, and it's single pilot certified, and I flew it single pilot many times, and it's just incredible flying, up at the flight levels, single pilot in this fully capable jet that is so pilot friendly. Um, it doesn't have a long range, but it gets the job done, and I think it's a really fun jet.
What does that airplane cruise at? It's above 400, right? Or is that maybe
Uh,
that's the 300?
yeah, it might be the 300.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. If you had unlimited money, would that be the one you'd go buy?
I think so. It's a family airplane and takes you to the mountains to go skiing and to the beach. And what else do you need? Yeah. So after that is like I said, I was home with my daughter, and I just had this desire. At the time, I was looking for aviation books about females, and this was about 9 years ago. I couldn't. There's maybe one or two aviation books that included female pilots. And having a daughter, it just became a big necessity to me to really start being an advocate for not just female pilots, but just that females could go be race car drivers or whatever they wanted. And I did a lot of research at the time on females and kids and development, and it really led to my desire to write a children's book. And so that was my passion project. After having my daughter, I self-published a book called Finding Amelia, and it's just something that was really important to me. And like I said, I think it's important to show these young girls, that they could do anything they want. And I think it usually starts around age 4 or 5 in kindergarten, and seeing female pilots in books is probably one of the first messages where they get that.
Talk to me about the story of that book.
So I went to an air show in Watsonville, California, and I rode in a biplane. And so this book is basically this young girl goes to an air show with her dog, and she flies in a biplane, and she flies through a cloud, and Amelia Earhart is in the seat with her, and so this cloud was this time portal, and so it just kind of turns out that after landing, she finds her scarf in the airplane, and she thinks, oh, maybe that wasn't a dream, maybe it really happened. So it's just kind of a fun experience that I had.
That's awesome. I need to get that one for my daughter. So
That's great. Yeah, and now there's a lot of books out there of female pilots. I mean, which is great to see. So there's a lot to choose from. So
yeah, for sure. It's really cool. From my experience, I don't know if it was unique or what, but there's always been I went to school at MTSU for their maintenance program, and they've got a whole aviation program. And there was lots of women in aviation when I was there. When I went through Air Force pilot training, there were females in my class, and even now in my unit back here in Knoxville and on the field, a lot of general and corporate aviation. I see a lot of women pilots, and it is awesome, and mechanics too. They're, for those of you out there that are thinking about a career path, it is a rewarding career path and definitely achievable for women in aviation today. And even that organization has been really, I'm actually a member of that, which is kind of funny. They told us back in college, they're like, yeah, you guys should apply for women in aviation. But it's very rewarding, and it's achievable and on all levels, right? So it's really cool, and I encourage really anyone, including females, to join in the fun. I kind of view myself as like an aviation proselytizer. I just want more people to join into the flying. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'm really gracious that I'm grateful that you wrote that book and getting the message out there. Talk to me a little bit. So I'm in the process of writing my own book, and it's pretty daunting. I'm not going to lie. I had a goal of, I might be able to crank this thing out in 6 months. No. What was your experience? How did you learn there's a whole process of how to write a book, and then what do you do with it after you write it? And then, all these steps. It seems really daunting. How'd you learn how to write a book? And then what was kind of the process that you used?
Yeah, well, luckily my book was only a children's book and more pictures than words. And so it was a little easier. But I remember something that really helped me was, and I'd actually had the story written for a long time. I just hadn't done anything with it. But something that helped me was I learned that it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be complete. And for me, and probably most pilots, we think, oh, I can't put this out in the world until it's absolutely perfect. And I think we get stuck on that perfectionism. And then it just never gets to the point where we think it's good enough to share. And so for me, I just kind of had to let go of knowing it wasn't perfect, but it was good enough, and just enjoy the process of working with an illustrator, of the layout. I did use a hybrid publishing company. So for me, I really enjoyed that part of it, that team effort part. But I think that's helped throughout my life a lot. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done.
Yeah, there is, for me in business, as I put out new products or new ideas to customers, in the beginning, I was like a perfectionist trying to make everything perfect along the way. And most of my customers are business owners. And they're like, James, just get it out there. If it fails, then no big deal. You just do something else, right?
Right. Yep.
Get it out. You're never going to know. It's never going to be perfect. Just get it out there. So there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I need to preach to myself with the book that I'm writing, because I keep falling into that trap. Talk to me about the publishing company. What was that process like, and how does that work?
So hybrid publishing is pretty nice because they have access with the ISBN. They have access to publishers and catalogs, and it does cost money up front because they are helping you create that product, and then you get a markup and sell your product. But I also raised about $8,000 on Kickstarter to support this dream. And so even that was like another side project of, having the book coming to completion. And that was fun. I've never done Kickstarter before. So, and then I used a company to find my illustrator, and I found an illustrator who is from Ukraine. And that was really fun working with her, because for her, when she hears airplanes, and this was 9 years ago, but same, like when she hears airplanes, she's thinking an airstrike's going to happen. She's not thinking it's a fun air show experience. Wow. And so going back and forth with her, she'd give me an illustration. I'd make some edits, and then when I'd wake up and I'd hear back from her, and she was all in watercolor, and I really loved her artwork. And so it was really fun working with her and the publisher. And then, you talk to the publisher, and they like, okay, and I had sent in the original paintings that she sent me from Ukraine. So I have these big pieces of original artwork that I sent to the publisher, and then they're working on digitizing it and the layout. And I was pretty much a project manager, because they send it back to me and I have to okay or change or make some edits. And that was a really fun process as well, just being so involved in it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'll definitely, I'm kind of in that process of trying to figure out, okay, do I start my own publishing company? Because some people do that. They have like their own, create a small publishing company on their own, or they do a hybrid, or they go to a larger publishing company. So I'll be going through those steps moving forward. So it's neat to hear your story there.
Yeah, I think it's probably advanced a lot more now than when I was going through it. So, there's Amazon publishing. You just, make your book on Amazon, and every time someone buys it, it prints it and makes it really simple.
Yeah, that's right. And now we have ChatGPT, right? So
yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned the person that helped you with illustrating in Ukraine. And how her perspective of what airplane sounds like means airstrike, right? It's so, I've been in the Air Force since 2011. Initially, I was a mechanic, and then got my degree and got picked up and sent to Air Force pilot training, officer training, then Air Force pilot training. But I remember one of my first deployments to the Middle East. And I've grown up going to air shows. When I see the B-52, I'm like, oh my God, that thing is awesome. When I see the B-2, that thing is awesome. When I see an F-22, F-35, it's just, wow, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I remember sitting through, it was an intake briefing with like a 2-star general when we got to the Middle East. And this was, when we were still in the Middle East in an active conflict, even though we still are, but, not in Afghanistan anymore. And I remember his briefing. He said, there are people right now, when they are at the time that LUD had tons of B-52s there, and I was working on the KC-135s. And so he was talking about the air power that was coming from our base. He said, there are people that tonight they will be praying that plane does not fly overhead. They're laying their heads down, praying that these planes that are coming from this base aren't flying overhead. And it was just such a culture shock and a perspective of, wow, I've never even considered, it's crazy to think it's a bomber, right? Like I've never considered aviation in that capacity of like, wow, danger. And so, and here in America, right, like we have this privilege of militarily, we've always, from our perspective at home, we've always been on top, right? And we've never had to experience any of that. And so it's a whole nother side of aviation that's just incredibly unique. And as Americans are extremely blessed that we don't have the same, trauma that your friend from Ukraine or the people in the Middle East aviation means something completely different to those people. It's very unique, and if you live in the United States, you should count yourself very blessed, honestly. It's never perfect, but we've never seen an active conflict here in the States with anyone that's been alive here today, right? So,
absolutely,
very interesting. So, wrote the book, and I want to shift gears just a little bit. TEDx. Talk to me about that, because I watch TEDx talks all the time, and it seems like a very lofty goal to get on TEDx. And it seems like you probably need a significant amount of coaching and experience to even get there. That was probably not a small goal or a small task to get there. Talk to me about how you got there, and then the experience, and then what your talk was on.
Again, James, it wasn't a goal. It was never a goal I had. Some things just kind of happen, and I've learned to keep walking when a door opens, to just go through it. And I think I've had a lot of amazing experiences because of just having some attitude of let's see where this takes me. So to talk about TEDx, I have to back up a little bit though. During COVID, I started being really curious about what makes female pilots, why they quit. When I was in college, we had a class of maybe 13 female pilots. And currently, I think maybe only 3 of us are flying. And I'm like, why are they quitting? Why are our percentages still so low as female pilots? And instead of going and finding those female pilots who had stopped along the way, I thought I would just flip this equation and instead go find the ones who were successful and start asking them what made them successful. And so during COVID, I just started interviewing female pilots. It was just, again, a thing that I was curious about. I had time. It was COVID. People were willing to talk to me for an hour. I wish I would have recorded it and made podcasts out of it, because I talked to many military. I talked to hurricane hunters. I talked to airline pilots, corporate pilots, helicopter pilots, sling pilots. So I ended up talking to 50 female pilots because I wanted to figure out what made female pilots successful, because I wanted to find the secret sauce so that I could then go coach female pilots to be successful. And so then I started a coaching program. I started my own interview prep and coaching program, and I started having not classes, but like coaching sessions with young female pilots. And we would talk about these things: interview prep, how to be successful, how to put yourself out there, how to have that confidence. And so after one of these classes, one of the young female pilots in my class emailed me one day. She goes, "Hey, TEDx is looking for speakers. I think you should apply." And in my coaching sessions, I would say, say yes to opportunity. And I thought, well, gosh darn it, I can't say no. Like my own mentee here is telling me I should do this, and I have to say yes. And so I said, okay, Lorraine, I'll say yes. And the next day I submitted. I just submitted the Google form, and I figured it would be something on female pilots. I had no idea what. And again, the door opened again, and I was asked to interview it was CU Boulder. So it was a group of the CU Boulder students who were putting on the TEDx every year. And so this group interviewed me, and I think it was 8 out of 94 who had applied. And so they were interested in female pilots and what I had to say about that. And so I was selected to speak. And so my topic was those 50 female pilots and what made them successful. And I was getting coached by college students. I was getting coached by their professor. And it was just a really amazing experience. I had a 13-minute speech memorized, and it was incredible. It was an incredible opportunity. And honestly, again, it wasn't a goal, but I've learned to say yes. And it was a great experience to be involved in.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think you're so right. Oftentimes, if you just have a positive outlook in life and you say yes, right?
Yeah.
Because there's people that would pick that apart, an opportunity, and they'd be like, no, I'm not going to waste my time with that. I blah, 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 right? They just come up with excuses to sabotage themselves, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
And so there's a really big message in there of your your paradigm is typically how people view that, right? If your paradigm is that you view the world as out to get you, and you need to be on the defense all the time, how does that uh, you know impact the results, and how you perceive opportunities that could be coming your way? And so I think that's really unique that your paradigm, you view things in a way that is positive, right? And view it as an opportunity. You don't really, and I think it's also cool that, you're not a public speaker, right? Like prior to then, right? How many major speaking events had you done?
I did one major one, and it was,
Okay.
yeah, I was a student body president in college, so I had to give the commencement address. Again, 22 years old, not having any idea what to do on stage, but yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have it all figured out. You can figure it out as you start doing it.
Yeah.
That's and we had touched on that already earlier, but this is a block that people have going into business. I'm a small business owner, and many people that I come in contact with that have an opportunity to do something or go into an investment or start a business, they sabotage themselves by saying, well, I have no clue how to do that. And it's like, wow, most people don't, and then they figure it out.
Yeah, you gotta start somewhere.
It's fine.
Yeah.
You will figure it out. Take the opportunity, take the punches, roll with it. So that's really cool. And how many hours would you say you prepped for that? For that TEDx? Because I know there's an immense amount of work to do that.
Yeah, it was maybe, I have no idea, 50 hours. I was practicing twice a day leading up to it. Yeah.
And really cool when people see TEDx on YouTube, they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. And they listen to it, move on, but you just don't understand how much effort those speakers are putting into that speech.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really cool. So now you're flying for United and the Boeing 787, right?
Yep.
Talk to me about what your airline journey has been like.
Well, obviously it's been a kind of a roundabout journey to get here. I had no desire to go to the airlines, but I watched how United was operating during COVID, through what was going on with my husband, and I really started to admire how United took a different stance in how they were operating. And so after COVID, one of the ladies who I'd actually interviewed is a 757 United captain. And she'd called me one day. She had a mentor program that she was wanting to partner with. And at the end of the call, she goes, "Hey, are you competitive? Send me your resume." And I said, "Yeah, I think I am." And she took my resume and she essentially walked it in to the hiring department. And again, I wasn't sure about the airlines. I wasn't sure if that was the right fit for me. But the doors kept opening. I was given the leadership assessment test and invited into interview, and was hired one of the first classes that they started after COVID. And I'm honestly wish I got here sooner. It has been such a fun job. I say people take jobs for two reasons: opportunity and culture. And I've found that at United. I'm in my fourth year here. I started on the 737, and I went to the 787 a year and a half ago. I fly all over the world. I never, ever, like as that 7-year-old kid watching that helicopter take off, like I never dreamed that I would be landing in Tokyo. And I'm flying a visual, downwind to base pattern landing in Tokyo. And I had this just amazing moment of thinking like, holy cow, how did this happen? This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a goal, but I'm here, and it's bigger than anything I think I could have dreamed. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity. Every time I do a walk around on the 787, I get butterflies. It's like, this is such a big plane. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's high tech.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine how big that aircraft is.
It is. And
listeners out there, the plane's huge.
It's incredible. It's the most advanced aircraft that Boeing has designed, and it's beautiful. It's a great plane. It's fun to fly. It reminds me of the Phenom. It's very, very high advanced tech, avionics. And so I've loved my path at United. I never thought I'd be an airline pilot, and I just think it's fun how it's come full circle for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, for the listeners out there, I mean, you can stand up inside the nacelle, right? I mean, and
Yes,
still have
yes,
plenty of room.
yep.
The inside diameter of the engine is just gigantic. I mean, I think I could fit my Boeing 707 that I fly inside the nacelle of the, the
Maybe your Icon 5 and then this.
the fuselage of the Boeing 707 would almost like fit into the nacelle. It's insane how big that aircraft. And I fly a 4-engine Boeing also.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably not popular now, but I still say it. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going.
Yep, me too.
It's not. I mean, they took some blows. I get it. But yeah, So, flying that aircraft. So I assume it's all fly by wire in that aircraft.
Yep. Yeah.
Very responsive. How much
Oh,
hand flying? Obviously, you said you flew visual pattern in. The hand flew the aircraft in.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it for all you GA pilots out there. Hand flying a Boeing 787 into a visual traffic pattern to land. Just imagine the scale of that. Heck, the Boeing 707 that I fly, the KC-135. I mean, we'll go out and shoot touch and goes, and inside the radar pattern, we're doing. We may have to do 250, which is
That's a lot. Yeah.
yeah, which is crazy. How hard is it to land?
Oh, it's so easy. It's the easiest plane I've ever landed, and it lands almost the same every single time. It counts down 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, and at 30, you pull the thrust back, and we have a HUD, which is new for me. So you like look through the HUD down the runway, just like you do any other landing. Just make sure you look at the end of the runway and flare, and it's a sweet plane to fly. I mean, to land.
Yeah,
it's pretty easy.
Do you get to do any GA flying as well?
Not really. My husband's part of the flying club, and he rents a 182, and sometimes he and I go out, but I like to just look out the window, and he does the flying and the radios, and we just, enjoy little planes together. And, but we might do a little bit more of that as he gets checked out in bigger planes.
I was going to ask you the difference of, you're flying the 787, which how many feet off the ground are you sitting in that plane? Do you know?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew that. That would be a good number to know.
Probably like 30 feet up at least.
It's up there.
So it's kind of funny. Anytime I take my bros from the Air Force Base to come fly GA with me, their first flare is like 50 feet off the ground. I'm like, keep flying it down, keep going down, keep going down.
I was amazed in GA planes that the door is like right there, and I'm just like, oh my god, I just opened up this door. This is crazy.
I assume if you went out to fly a GA plane right now, you'd probably flare at like what, 50 feet, 80 feet.
That's a great assumption. Yep. We're landing.
That's awesome. So what's next on the horizon for you, moving forward in your aviation career?
I'm pretty happy with where I am. I have a job that I love more than anything, and I feel like I'm really satisfied in my career right now. And I think that's been my goal for a long time, is to have that satisfaction and that fulfillment in my profession. And I've had it in my family life for a while, and just to have those things be well balanced right now as I'm not going to go mess that up. I'm enjoying the ride.
That's awesome. I do want to touch on that for a second. There is that saying of, for whatever reason with young pilots coming out, they're like, well, I don't want to fly airlines. That just sounds boring, and I don't want to hate my job. I hear that all the time. And I even thought that, growing up, I was like, well, I don't want to fly for the airlines and hate my job, and I met a mentor right before I went to Air Force pilot training who had flown for 40 years for United, actually. And he said, James, I've loved every minute. There's been ups and downs. Obviously, there was layoffs and whatnot, but he's like, there's nothing else that I would have wanted to do. There's nothing. He's like, honestly, I would have done it for free. I loved every minute of the times that I was with the airlines, and I think that's a message that needs to be out there. I personally don't have any interest in going to the airlines. I'm going to be frank with you. I love what I'm doing. I get to play with airplanes all day, every day, and fly sometimes 4 different airplanes in the same day, and get to wrench on it. But I would like just because you brought it up, I'd like other people out there, if you're a young pilot listening to this, the airlines are a great option, and there are plenty of people that absolutely love it. It sounds like you share the same sentiment.
Absolutely. I think of the layovers I've had, the opportunities I've had, the people we work with is amazing. And for me, I was coaching everyone else to go to the airlines. I'd say it's the best gig in town. You should do it. And then I had to look at myself and question, well, why am I not looking at that? And my big thing was just fear of commitment. I was afraid if I got to the airlines and I didn't like it, that I would be stuck. And I realized that's not true. People do quit the airlines. You don't hear of it that often. And I think for me, that gave me the freedom to go check it out. And I understand when people say I don't want to fly for the airlines. And I'm a big advocate of go have fun flying, go fly seaplanes, go to Alaska for the summer, my husband flew fires. As a fire bomber. There's jobs all over the world. Go have fun flying. And, when you've done it all, the airlines might be a great place to land for the remainder of your career.
Yeah, you're exactly right. What were some of the other stigmas that you may have believed that you found not to be true when you got to the airlines?
I thought for whatever reason I'd fly to the same city every day and I'd stay in the same hotel and I'd get bored. And that's not the case. Like like I said, I've flown all over the world. I've had a 48-hour layover in Tahiti and went scuba diving with my captain. I've flown to Quito, Ecuador, and walked across the equator. I just got back from London. We went to Greenwich. We took an Uber boat ride on the Thames, went to Greenwich, England, and stood on the Prime Meridian. Like that's what we get to do on our layovers. And it's the best adventure. I tell people, actually, what I would like to tell people, this young generation, I would like to tell them that the airlines, it's like flying a video game in the sky. You get to chase adventure and you get paid really well. And I don't know why anyone would not want to go do that. But I think it's the best gig in town, at least for me right now. So
That's awesome. The biggest one that I heard, somebody early on told me, and I was really young. I think I was still like just getting my first hours as a pilot. I was probably like 16 or 15 or 16, and somebody bumped into me and they're like, yeah, well, if you want a family, don't join the airlines. It's just like stuck with me. And that was just something I believed for years. It sounds like you've got a family and it seems to be working out.
yeah.
I know many other people that have very successful families and fly for the airlines. What is your thoughts on that stigma? And I hear that a lot still to this day. People say that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think if you want it enough, you'll figure out how to make it work. And that's what my husband and I did. He has an instructor position at United. I have a management position at United. We put our kids to bed every night. In fact, actually, he just took off today. He's flying a trip to Rome. I get to be with my girls, and I love that. And we're going to go have girl dinner after this. And I think I don't like the word sacrifice, actually, because I don't think we've had to sacrifice anything. But for the first couple of years, we've had like a live-in au pair that kind of helped cover our schedules for us. And that may not be ideal, but it's how we were able to make it work. And so I think that if there's a lot of question or trepidation out there of how to have an airline or a two-family, parents or family out there, they'll find a way to make it work. I know sometimes people bid opposite schedules. there's opportunities like being instructors, like working in the building, and you're home every night. I know a lot of couples at United actually, and they seem to have found their secret solution for them. And so it's possible. I wouldn't say no just because you're afraid of not knowing how to make it work.
Yep. We talked about this earlier. Your paradigm.
Yep.
You're a
Sure
negative
have.
person. You're a negative person. You're looking to poke the holes in everything, every opportunity that you have in life. You're never going to figure it out because you're going to sabotage yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Figure out how do I make it work, right? So there's also people that work normal jobs and they don't have bad family life. So,
Yes.
plenty of people that I know in my life, okay, that have normal jobs. They can't make their family work either. Okay, you can do it. It's got to be your paradigm.
Yeah, and I think of the people who have a 9 to 5 and they must come home like so tired. They see their kids for like an hour before school and an hour after, and it's bedtime. And I'm like, when are you hanging out with your kids? And for us, we have more of like days on and days off. And I think we made it work. Like I said, we've got that happy balance. But we're, like you said, we're both really optimistic people. So
That's awesome. Well, Lynsey, I want to be respectful of your time. We've covered a ton, and I feel like we could honestly keep going. And you can tell this is genuine. Like when you get aviators in the room, it's just, you could see the sparkle, and they just want to talk about airplanes for hours. If you ever go to an air show, you hang around the airport. It's just a lot of fun. And Lynsey, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you so much for sharing your story in aviation. Is there any last words that you like to give other people that are listening and on the fence about joining in aviation? Maybe it's a female out there that's scared that it's not going to work.
Well, I could go on that subject for a long time. I think I've had a pretty strong message this whole time. I think if you want it enough, you'll find out how to make it work. You'll get the bug, and nothing else will distract you. There's going to be hard times and bumps in the road, and I've even quit aviation 2 times and got back into it because I can't figure out what else I would do with myself. It's a love affair, and it's one of my most loved affairs in my life. And I think that if you get that too, you're going to have a world of adventure, and you're going to have a great life.
I agree with you. And again, thank you for being on the show. And to my listeners out there, another great episode. Be sure to like and subscribe. We'll have another episode next week of another great, guest from aviation. And each one has a unique story that I think is really cool. And so tune in, like and subscribe, and happy flying.
Thanks, James.